For those that are waiting for the webinar to start, we'll be starting in just a few minutes. We'll give people time to enter and join the room. If you're just joining right now, there is no sound, so no problem with your microphone. We'll be starting in just a couple minutes. If you're just joining, we will be starting in 2 minutes. And so thank you for your patience, and we will begin soon. If you are just joining, just to let you know, please thank you for your patience, and we'll be beginning in 1 minute. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second webinar in our Birding the Oregon Coast series. Tonight's webinar is titled Birds of Backyard, Forest, and Stream. My name is Kent Doty. I am the Coastal Conservation Coordinator for Seven Capes Bird Alliance. What's happening? Excuse me, slides. There we go. We're thrilled this evening to have the Oregon Birding Association and Kalmiopsis Audubon Society as our partners on this webinar. Thank you for all the amazing work that you do. Also, I want to give a shout out to Nissa Parker of Seven Capes Digital media coordinator. She was not able to attend this evening, but she was instrumental in bringing this webinar to you. The webinar isn't we're using the webinar format, so only the panelists are visible. The audience is muted for the courtesy of the speaker. Following the introductions, our speaker will talk for about 50 minutes. There'll be plenty of time for question and answers following the presentation. If you would put during the presentation your questions in the Q&A tab down at the bottom of your screen, we will get to those after the presentation. And tonight we'll finish up about 7:30. And just to let everyone know, we are recording this session. So a little bit about who we are. Seven Capes Bird Alliance, formerly the Audubon Society of Lincoln City, has been serving Lincoln and Tillamook counties since 2006. Our core programs are education, community science, and conservation action. We provide monthly birding outings suitable for all ages and knowledge levels. Our conservation focus areas include forest practices, rocky habitats, marine reserves, water quality, and threats to birds and wildlife, all viewed through the lens of climate change. You can learn more about us at sevencapes.org. And just to put a plug in for our upcoming series this fall, we will be having a series on the importance of citizen-generated data for wildlife research and avian conservation. The series is titled Data for the Birds, and it will begin October 8th, so look for that coming up. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the land we are living on and the people who occupied it. Before the period of white settlement, the land and waters we now occupy on the Oregon coast were home to the Tillamook and Alsea people. It is right and just to recognize these sovereign Indian nations and to remember the dispossession they were forced to endure. Despite these losses, Tillamook and Alsea people continue to thrive and act collectively as part of the Confederated Tribes. As we engage with wildlife environment that surrounds us, we pledge to learn from these Indian nations with the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz, as well as our neighbors, the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. We look forward to collaborating on common goals. And now it is a really great pleasure to get to introduce Dawn. She is a friend, a supervisor, an all-around amazing person. And anybody that knows her realizes it doesn't take long to learn that she's passionate about birds. Dawn Harris serves as the Visitor Services Manager for 9 National Wildlife Refuges in Oregon and Washington. She has worked in the field of natural resource conservation for 34 years and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for 26 years. Her career began in the swamps of North Carolina and is now on the rocky shores of Oregon. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Forest Resources and Conservation from the University of Florida and a Master's of Science in Wildlife Biology from Oregon State University. Her interests include birdwatching, gardening, chicken keeping, parrot rescue, travel, and watching her husband perform theatrical acts. But with that, I will turn it over to Dawn, and I think we're in for a real treat this evening.
All right, thanks so much, Kent. Can everybody, or can you hear me okay, Kent? Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and give me a thumbs up if that looks like it's working. Okay, great. Thanks everyone for joining me. I did get to see a sneak peek at the list, and it looks like I know a few of you. And I know some of you will know everything I have to share tonight, because this presentation is tailored for folks who really may not know a lot about the birds here on the Oregon coast, but have been bird curious and want to learn more. I do have some fun facts to share about a few of them, and then some personal anecdotes. But I would definitely say the target audience for this is people who may not know as much about the birds here, but are really interested in learning more. Okay, with that, let's get started. Just a little bit more about me and what I do. I've been here on the Oregon coast since 2001 when I was hired by Roy Lowe, who was your last speaker, I think, in this series, and who remains a good friend of mine. He hired me to be the visitor services manager for 6 National Wildlife Refuges on the Oregon coast. And a lot of people are sort of like, what does that mean? What do you do? So my daily life, a lot of times is spent sitting in front of a computer, unfortunately, but sometimes I get to go outside. And part of my job is community outreach. This is at the Hatfield Marine Science Center here, the first picture on their Marine Science Day. The second picture is me being pretty judgy about a landslide that happened on one of our nature trails, because I'm also in charge of helping oversee our outdoor recreation trails and facilities. And then also occasionally I get to work with young kids and take them on trips to our National Wildlife Refuges, so environmental education. And then a large part of my job is actually working with the community of volunteers who want to give back their time to helping basically with environmental education, trails, facilities, and community outreach. And I have a lot of those folks on board right now this summer who you may meet if you're out looking at some of the seabirds on the Oregon coast. And then in my personal life, I love travel and I love birds. And so almost all of my travel is to see birds in other countries. Here's a picture of me and some plain parakeets in Brazil. I think, no, this might have been Colombia. And you can see with a little handful of sunflower seeds, they were willing to be close study subjects. So this is my passion outside of work. I joke with my husband that I wake up thinking about birds and I go to bed thinking about birds. And I think about birds a lot in the middle of the day too. And fortunately, my work does allow me to think about birds too. Okay, so as I said in this presentation, we're going to talk about some of the basic birds, or like more common birds you can see here on the coast. I'll start with birds that you can see in your backyard if you have a little bit of habitat at least. And then if you live against a forest, you might have some birds visit your yard that you're familiar with. Then a few birds that would be fields. We don't have a lot of fields on the Oregon coast, but we do have some species that use fields. And then I'll end with how to attract birds and 4 things that you can do to help birds in your community or even in your yard. I'll share that in my yard, and I do live alongside a wetland, so that affords me more birds than folks who might be right in the city or in town. I have a yard list of 110 species, and there's no way I can cover that many species in this presentation. I would probably lose all of you. You might be bored, but we're going to focus on those most common ones in this presentation. And I think you'll be familiar with a few. So here we'll start right on with birds of our backyard. I'll also share how I've set the slides up just to give you a little tip. In either the bottom right or somewhere on the screen, if you see, hopefully you can see this little, hey Kent, give me a thumbs up if you can see my cursor. I'm pointing in the lower right at this little icon. You can see it? Okay, and it shows a bird feeder setup. If you see that icon on my slide, it means that you can do something to attract this bird to your yard through feeding or water. The other thing is I do have the notes here broken up into 3 ways, sort of just like what was the overall general size and shape of this bird and some identifying features, then drilling down a little bit more into some pro tips on what to look for if you're trying to identify the bird, and then a little bit on behavior. For any of you who have taken like a beginning birding class, a lot of the first thing you want to do when you're learning to identify birds is just elimination. What kind of habitat am I in? What kind of behavior is this bird engaging in? Before you even think about size and color, you can eliminate a lot of birds that just wouldn't be a candidate for whatever species it is. So that's how I've broken out these tips. And then the photos are mostly from a colleague of mine, Jake Bonello, who's the refuge manager at Julia Butler Hanson Refuge. And then also my husband, who is Ron Papish, who some of you may know. But then I've also used a few other photos that I had to glean that I didn't have from Jake and Rom, and a few that I took, because sometimes I actually pull out my iPhone and take a picture, but they're not nearly as good as these professional photos. Okay, so let's get started. The first bird we have on our list, I think almost everyone probably knows a little bit about, and that's the rufous hummingbird. And it is North America's extremist bird. And what I mean by that is it goes, or it migrates all the way from equatorial tropics all the way to the northernmost latitudes in Southeast Alaska. So it is one of the longest migrators, and it is the most northern nesting hummingbird in North America. Now, this bird is currently a bird of conservation concern in the Fish and Wildlife Service. Its habitat is declining, and the International Union for the Conservation of Nature has listed it as near threatened at this point due to habitat loss. So if you have these little birds in your yard, hopefully you're providing a nectar source or some habitat to help these birds maybe make a comeback. Because when in our gardens, when we plant flowers and pollinator-friendly plants, it does help our hummingbirds as well. So as you can see, it's tiny. I think we all know that, a little slender bill. This is a female featured in this photo. So you can see it just has a little hint of the orange and green that is typical of a rufous hummingbird, different from the male, which I do have a picture of, whose body is almost all orange with just a little bit of white under the throat. You can see I have this word here, for those of you who don't know, it's called gorget or gorget. I've heard it pronounced both ways. That is the little throat patch on a hummingbird. It's this area right under, like at the chin area. And we bring attention to that on hummingbirds because usually that's very flashy and colorful in a male. And if anyone knows anything, they know rufous hummingbirds are not afraid. They are considered quite aggressive. They'll come up to people and chase them away. They definitely are aggressive to our Anna's hummingbirds and other hummingbirds in the area. So that's sort of one of the things people know them for. And often people who have feeders out have to put them one side of the house and put it out of the way around the other side of the house, because if you have two feeders, one little rufous hummingbird will just dominate that feeder. And I have that set up at my house where I have one and I have the other way around the other side of the house. So that one male can't sit and watch that feeder all the time. But I love them anyway. And here's a picture of the male. You can see in contrast to the female there, whose body has a little bit of that green on the back, that male is just all rufous. And of course, that's where it gets its name. And then its gorget is also that rufous rusty color that just shimmers in sunlight. Okay, and then we have our second garden bird, hummingbird, that is here. Oh, and I'm sorry, I meant to mention the rufous hummingbird is only here in the summer months. So they migrate up here just to have their young and then right back down into the equatorial tropics. I've seen them in Mexico on birdwatching trips there. So the next bird, though, which we have year-round now, is the Anna's hummingbird. And again, I'm featuring a female, you know, because the males, they always get all the attention. They're more gorgeous. We all know that. So I like to feature the little females first, and then we'll get to the male picture. So you can see this one is on a Lucifer's crocosmia, just that little flower in the foreground. And interestingly, Anna's hummingbird is a species that has expanded its range dramatically since the about 100 years ago. It started in the 1930s. It used to only nest on the Pacific slope of northern Baja California, which is in Mexico, and then California north to the San Francisco Bay Area. That was it. But it has expanded all the way north up into Vancouver Island in British Columbia now, and it's moving eastward into Arizona. So it's also starting to show up in West Texas. So we'll see what happens with this bird. Why is that happening? Well, it's a bird that can take advantage of our gardens, cultivated lands, exotic plants that we put out that are providing food and nectar sources year round in some of these warmer climates. So we're seeing it in a lot more places. And of course, it would have been unheard of 50 years ago to see Anna's hummingbirds over the winter, but now we have them all winter. I have them at my house all winter too. They're small and stocky for a hummingbird. You can see on this female, her colors aren't that vibrant. They're a little bit green and gray, but even she has a little flash of pink in sunlight. And one of the things you can always tell when a Anna's hummingbird is around is you can listen for their call. To me, and all the older folks in here will know, it sounds like when you used to have an old console TV and it had a little bit of static, like a that's what it sound is like. And it reminds me of like growing up in the 70s. For those of you, I'm dating myself. And here we have the gorgeous male. This is a full-on gorget of the Anna's hummingbird. And if you've been lucky enough to see a male perched, they flare that out. They'll do a little aerial display and come back down. And what girl wouldn't be tempted by that little beauty there? Okay, let's move to our next. We're leaving our hummingbirds. Those are pretty much the only hummingbirds that we see regularly on the coast of Oregon in our backyards. Now, a lot of you who do feed birds already may be seeing this bird around right now. You can see my little feeder icon in the bottom right. This is the American goldfinch, and this is a male. These birds are only bright like this in the breeding season. So they will molt out of this bright plumage into a drabber plumage in the winter. And sometimes people will ask me, I'm seeing this bird and I think it's a baby or it's a female. They don't realize that it's a male that has just lost or molted out that bright canary yellow plumage, that lemon yellow plumage for this drabber winter plumage. They are social birds, so you're usually going to see more than one. It's kind of rare to just see a single goldfinch. And one of the things you want to look for to determine it's a goldfinch, not just that canary yellow, also that little black cap, but that the wing here, all these flight feathers are black and they have these white bars on that, two pale wing bars. That's important when I share a bird that could be a similar looking bird. In a future slide, you'll see it lacks this black winged and the stripes. So that's how you tell. Also, finches have this type of conical beak. It's sort of a cone with a point on the end. Usually that indicates it's a seed-eating bird. So when you see that type of beak, you think that's a seed-eating bird. And one other thing is when they fly, they're undulating. So you'll see them, and undulating just means up and down, up and down. And some people say they say potato chip when they fly. And I like to think they do say that. And then I want a potato chip. And here is a female, much duller yellow, just a little bit of, much drabber and just a touch of yellow right there around the face. But you can still see that diagnostic field mark. A field mark, for those of you who are just getting into bird watching, is like a diagnostic feature that you would look at on the bird to help ID it. So it might be that black cap on the male. The diagnostic feature for both, though, is that black wing with the white wing bars. Okay, let's move to our purple finch. And this is also a bird that comes up here, and you see a lot of them this time of year. They're having their young on the coast of Oregon and other places throughout Oregon. And they are one of the larger birds I get at my feeder. Now I get jays, that would be the biggest. Well, not true, I get pigeons too. But this is one of the largest, let's say, songbirds of the garden. And the males have a beautiful and complex warbling song. If you've heard it and you learn it, you just know, like, oh, that is one of the prettier songs. The robin, the purple finch, and the black-headed grosbeak are some of my favorite songs. And of course, they are not purple. I believe we all can agree this bird is more like raspberry colored or pinkish. But for whatever reason, someone thought they were purple. Maybe you do too, but I would call it more of a raspberry color. And so that makes it more conspicuous in our gardens because it stands out a little because of that color. We don't have a ton of flashy, colorful birds in Oregon on the coast, but this happens to be one of them that shows up. Now, they can be tough to ID, especially the females. The male is a streaky brown, as you can see with that raspberry color, but the female has no raspberry color on her. She is just streaky brown and then sort of a buffy white color. I'll show a picture of her. Let me go ahead and put that up. Here's the female. So a lot of people might see that and go, oh, how do you know that's not a sparrow? How do you know that's a purple finch? Well, it's not easy. Look who it's hanging out with is one of your first clues. Is it hanging out near a male? Is it at the feeder? Is it perched on a feeder? A lot of sparrows will be eating on the ground, where the finches will usually be up on the feeders. They'll go to the ground if that's where all the food is at this point, but that's just one little behavior tip you can use to just start doing that elimination, as I was mentioning. They also, the females, have these distinctive, if you can see, this white stripe, or it's kind of a buffy white. These two stripes are very important in identifying a female purple finch from a female house finch, which is the picture I just showed. So otherwise, these birds, you could look and just be like, I don't know, I give up finches, female finches, but look how it lacks that little eye stripe. Both these birds have a little notch in the tail, and again, that conical bill that is indicative of finches. It looks like it's got some food. I can't tell what kind of food has there. Okay, here is one of our favorite songbirds, chestnut-backed chickadee. For those who don't know, this bird is native to the West Coast. So you're not going to find chestnut-backed chickadees in the Midwest or on the East Coast, especially just to the West Coast. They are very small, but all chickadees have a big head. Hardly looks like it on this one. This bird is quite ragged. I mentioned I'd have some little anecdotal stories from our yard. My husband took this picture. We have a lot of nest boxes up, and we had a chestnut-backed chickadee. And this, I don't know if it's a mother or a father, can't tell the gender of this bird, but it looks pretty haggard. It ended up having 4 babies it raised, and you can see the little juvenile, the immature bird, to the right of it. Look at that fresh plumage. It's just like perfect looking. It's like, Mom, you do, or Dad, you do all the work, and I'll just sit here and have you feed me. And you can see this bird has a little bit of, I make my own suet, which they really like, and it's trying to feed this bird a little bit of suet, but this immature looks like it might be full. Anyway, looks like it's pretty rough raising 4 baby chickadees. But you can tell a chestnut-backed chickadee. All chickadees have that characteristic black and white pattern on the face. So it's like the black cap, the big bold white stripe, and then the black on the chin. But what the other chickadee we have here, which we'll look at next, this bird has that one doesn't, is this beautiful chestnut color on its back and also on its flanks. And flanks are the thigh area of this bird. And all chickadees are active and noisy and acrobatic. You see them flying around trees and landing on cones, and just like they're in all the business of all the little cones and stuff on the trees, often seen upside down. And in winter, they do what's called feeding flocks or winter feeding flocks. So they'll be with other species like kinglets and nuthatches, and particularly golden crown kinglet nuthatches. I've seen them with brown creepers might join those groups too. So that's a nice thing to see in the wintertime, because these birds are not migrating. They're going to be here year round. And they also have an undulating flight. So when you see them, they have a little bit of that up and down flight. And interestingly, this species of chickadee has no whistled song. It just has a call, but no whistled song, which would attract mates or set up a territory. Our next chickadee does have a whistled song, though, and that is the black-capped chickadee. It is a familiar and widespread species throughout North America, also not migratory. And as you can see, that cap and bib, the bib is just this area right here, of course, is black, and the cheek is nice, bright white, and then that soft gray on the back instead of chestnut, like the chestnut-backed chickadee. They are also very small. They have a sweet dark eye, I think. I know that's anthropomorphizing. I don't care. I threw that out the window years ago. This bird is cute. Its big dark eye makes it endearing, and I love chickadees. And at a feeder, they aren't a bird that's going to sit around. So like your goldfinch and your purple finch might just land on the feeder and hang out for a while. You're always going to see your chickadee dart in, grab a seed, and then dart back off again. And then often you'll see it put the seed between its little feet and peck it open, especially if it's a black oil sunflower seed. And it's going to put it between there, hold it, and then peck to get that juicy little center out. Okay, leaving our chickadees, we now have one of our familiar garden birds that I get here at in my yard year round, and that's called the dark-eyed junco. You may not realize that there are many different varieties of dark-eyed junco. Our variety here is called the Oregon junco, and it is distinctive from others across, like maybe you've heard of slate-colored or pink-sided across North America, and then it has this black hood. So all this area around its head is a hood, and then that moves into this brown back and this buffy side. All juncos, though, no matter where you are and what variety it is, always have two white outer tail feathers on each side. So when they fly, if you see a small bird flying off the ground and on each side of the tail, there's two solid white feathers, and then all the rest are dark, you know you've got a junco. The behavior of these birds is they're going to be hopping around on the ground. They often like to hang out on the edge of like the grass and the forest land, like a lot of sparrows do too. This bird is a type of sparrow. And they'll have high chip notes that you might hear as they're flying around or taking cover back out of danger after they come out and look around for some seed. This is also a bird that will come to your feeders. They like millet and a little bit of cracked corn. Here's just another nice picture showing the side, because this first picture just showed the buffy white belly and that hood, but here's the Oregon variety of dark-eyed junco, little pink conical bill, and then that nice brown on the back. Look at those long toes. Those are sparrow toes for scratching around looking for seed. Okay, now let's look at our friend, the song sparrow. This is one of those birds that when I am doing bird walks or teaching people about birds, the first bird I say to learn is the song sparrow, because it is plain. It is hard to ID if you aren't, if you're just getting started. But if you learn the song sparrow, a lot of the other birds are so much easier because it's what we call that LBJ or little brown job or little brown bird. They're small and chunky. They got that streaky brown and white. I mean, to me, it's just like poster child for sparrow. And they like to flit through the vegetation. I feel like every backyard practically has a song sparrow if you've got any type of habitat, but not too many. Like they're not overly abundant. Even in my yard where I have a lot of birds, I might have 5 or 6 song sparrows, or sometimes I could have dozens, of chickadees. So they do build open cup nests, and they're going to be nesting right now. And they use a variety of habitat, which is why they're so common and widespread in North America. They're looking for insects and seeds, insects to feed the young, seeds for themselves. And they have a lovely little song as well that a lot of people recognize, and that's why it gets its name, the song sparrow. Now let's cover another sparrow that's pretty common in our area, the white-crowned sparrow. So it's larger than the song sparrow, and it's got that bold black and white pattern on the head, but only this time of year, which is the breeding season. They also like brushy habitats. You can see them like skulking on the edge, but they'll pop out in their little flocks. Usually there's a few of them, and come out and scratch around looking for seeds. One nice field mark, remember we talked about field marks, aside from that bold black and white pattern on the head, is that yellow conical bill. So that bill is going to be a nice bright little yellow. They are one of the most studied songbirds of all non-game species. And non-game means, of course, none of these songbirds are hunted. And they had the reason for that, and like why ornithologists are really attracted to studying them, is they have a very wide distribution, and it's pretty abundant across most of its range. and it is a conspicuous bird. It's not terribly shy, so you can usually see it during most of the stages of its life cycle. So it's been studied a lot, and we know a lot about this little bird. Now I'm going to show you, this is what a bird, a female or an immature, is not going to have that bold black and white face pattern on the head. So when sparrows get difficult to ID is in the winter time, when they have molted out those, nice, bright breeding plumage, and now they're going to be in something a little more drab. This bird also, in contrast to the song sparrow, look at that clean breast. The song sparrow had streaks all down its breast and chest, but the white-crowned sparrow is a nice clean breast. And then we have the golden-crowned sparrow. I'm going to go ahead and put up a picture of a male. Look at how different that bird is, immature, female, and also winter. So this is what you would see this time of year, but we don't have golden-crowned sparrows nesting here. I mean, there may be a one-off, but Oregon coast is not their nesting territory. They are here in the winter. So this is when we have most of our golden-crowned sparrows. We do have white-crowned sparrows this time of year, but we don't have any golden-crowned sparrows. It's a large little handsome sparrow, and it's common, bird of like weedy, shrubby lowlands. And again, winter on the coast. In summer, it gets that nice, bold black pattern and that golden little head top. And they have a little mournful song. I'm thinking now I should have included some sound, but when I thought about it, I was like, this is going to be one of those things where you hope it works in your presentation and then it doesn't, and then you spend time talking about how it doesn't work and you wish it did. So I just opted out. You'll just have to go listen to your Merlin app or something if you want to hear its mournful little song. Okay, now let's go and look at our our last actual sparrow that I'm going to cover, and that is the spotted towhee. If I could see all your faces, I'd say raise your hands if you knew this was a sparrow. You may not have known because it doesn't quite look like our other sparrows, but it is in that family. It's a large sparrow with a very thick pointed bill and a really stout frame. And I just love that red eye on it. It's just, to me, unmistakable. But you see that in the field guide, unmistakable, it's overwritten. And you're like, okay, well, there's like 8,000 birds that are unmistakable. But in our gardens, I feel like this is one of those. And, they're kind of a little bit shy, but you'll see them pop out once in a while. And when they do, they don't seem like they're all that shy. They're jaunty. They have that tail sticking up, just like you see that bird here. And a little bit timid if another bird or, a person comes out. Like I don't usually find that they will hang out or come near me if I'm tossing some millage or something out. So they have a black throat and a hood, just like our junco has a dark hood, but they have that bright belly and those rufous flanks. Some of you who've been birding for a long time may know this bird as the rufous-sided towhee, and that is what it was called for many decades. But then ornithologists split this species into the eastern towhee and then the spotted towhee. And it gets the name spotted towhee from those little white spots that you can see on its wing here. Oh, I don't know if I'm pointing to that and you can see it, but you see its wing is black, but then it has these little white spots. On the eastern towhee, there are no spots in this area, or there might just be one, but their wings are black, and our little spotted towhee has spots. They have a 2-foot scratch method. If you ever see them, they kind of remind me of chickens, although my chickens, they hold their head up and scratch with 1 foot, but they just remind me they're long-legged, long-toed, long nails, and they love to scratch the leaf litter away to look for the seeds and little invertebrates or insects that might be underneath. And one thing you may not know is these birds are monogamous. Not all of our songbirds are, in fact, most aren't, but these birds are monogamous. Okay, that's our last true sparrow. Now, I heard a collective, oh, how could she show this bird? Or maybe you didn't, but this is our little friend, the house sparrow. It is not a New World sparrow. It is what's considered an Old World sparrow, and what some would say is an Old World weaver finch. It is an invasive species to North America. It's been here for a long time, though well established. Of course, as you know, they're chunky, full-chested. They've got a really round head, almost no neck, and they do have that conical seed-eating bill. But I've seen them eat French fries and pizza and anything else you want to toss on them while you're eating at a restaurant. The males that are mature have this black bib. This bird just shows a little bit of black under its chin, but those bibs can go quite far down depending on the age of the bird. And then the female is just plain grayish brown. Here's a picture of her. Now that can be really hard to ID. Again, my pro tip is, who is it hanging out with? Look at it first. If it's hanging out with one of these guys, you pretty much know what you're getting. But if you just have a female house sparrow, it may be hard to distinguish between, say, an immature golden crown sparrow or immature song sparrow or white crown sparrow. You know, take the time to look at some of those other factors, like it doesn't have any type of striping up here, and look at the streaking pattern on this bird versus those if you want to ID them differently. They are very comfortable around humans, as you know, and are quite noisy and gregarious. And they are cavity nesters. So one of the things that frustrates people like me is you put up nest boxes and you might get one of these birds instead of a swallow or a chickadee, which is what you really want to nest. So here's a slide illustrating that point. Can you tell the difference? These are different species. This is our little friend, the sparrow, the white crown sparrow we saw earlier, and this is our friend, the female house sparrow. But you can see how it's quite difficult to tell apart. This is an immature white crown sparrow, I should say, on the left, and this is a mature house sparrow on the right. There's that, yeah, remember I talked on the white crown sparrow about the yellow bill? Yellow bill versus a little pink bill. There's one of your pro tips. Okay, now let's look at the enemy of these small songbirds we've been learning about. This is called the sharp-shinned hawk, and it is widely dispersed throughout North America, yet seldom seen. They're around, but sometimes you don't see them unless they come in for an attack. They usually lurk around in the forest looking for songbirds. They will take other prey, but the primary diet is going to be small birds. You can see here in my little box, I have a slender, feisty dinosaur. Okay, they're not a dinosaur, they are a raptor, but they behave like a dinosaur. I have had them land right next to me in midday when they were after a chicken. And I'm just like, you know, I'm standing 3 feet away. They don't care. They're like, dinosaur don't care. They have short rounded wings and a small head and broad gray bars in the tail. So this is one of those field marks you want to look for. Look at that tail. It has that kind of buffy white and then those thicker black lines. And they have, typically the sharp-shinned hawk has a squared off tail tip versus the Cooper's hawk, which is curved. So Cooper's curved, sharp-shinned square. Now let's look at these two birds. It's the same species. You might be like, but Dawn, one's got a yellow eye and one's got a red eye and one's got streaky brown breast and one's got horizontal rufous. That is the difference. On the left here, what you're seeing is a mature adult. So it has a slaty blue-gray above. You can see that color here on its head in this picture. And if this bird were turned around, its entire back is that same color. And it has those narrower horizontal red-orange bars that are on the breast. But an immature bird is going to be streaky brown all over with those coarse vertical stripes. All of the birds in this family, the accipiter family, have this long middle toe too, and big eyes. And these big eyes are important in helping them hunt down birds in like our darker forests or woodlands. And especially they got to be mobile because a lot of this prey is real fast too. A chickadee is fast. So these birds also are agile flyers. Okay, so we're leaving some of the birds of our backyards and we're going to look at birds of our forests. But some of these come to our backyards too. Down here in the bottom right, we have our little friend, the Wilson's warbler. They have just arrived in Oregon, maybe like a month ago. up from Mexico. We'll talk about them in a minute. But here's a bird that is common at feeders, especially if you feed peanuts or suet. It's called the Steller's jay. I can't tell you how many times over the 20 something years I've worked that everyone's like, I saw a blue jay. I have blue jays in my yard. I love the blue jays. They are a jay and they are blue, but there is actually a species called a blue jay, and that would be found to the east. We don't, I mean, it would be exciting if an actual blue jay showed up here on the Oregon coast, but what we have here are Steller's jays, and they are a very large songbird. You may not have known they're a songbird. Large, hefty body. They've got a long, beautiful tail, and they have that triangular crest. Not all jays have a triangular crest. If you've been to the Willamette Valley, you'll see a scrub jay there, and you know they don't have a crest. But this is considered one of our crested jays. They have that nice dark head, rich blue feathers. And then if you ever look at their wings, especially in this area right here, this one's not showing it as well, but in nice light, that almost sparkles like iridescence. And they love mixed coniferous forests. They habituate very readily to people. They'll come to bird feeders. They'll come to your picnic area, your campground. And I know it's called a songbird, but they don't really have a beautiful song. They have a real loud, raucous call, and they love to announce their presence when they show up with a shook, shook, shook. And they are very intelligent and bold, inquisitive, and noisy birds that I'm sure you're all aware of. But some people love to hate them. I really like my Steller's jays. And then another bird that you may have at your feeders, but we definitely have in our woodlands around here, is a hairy woodpecker. This is a bird that nested in a cavity in our yard, my yard last year. My husband took this picture. This is the adult female on the left, and then the young is being fed on the right. And if you notice that that is a young bird that has a red crown patch. Now I'll show you in the next picture, adult male hairy woodpeckers actually have red right here. They don't have any red right here, but the immature male has a red crown patch right here, and then that molts out, and if it's going to be a male, it will have red here as it ages. And this bird's name is derived from these long filamentous white or whitish feathers that they get on the middle of their back, called the hairy woodpecker. And even among woodpeckers, it's really well adapted for climbing and pecking. One of the diagnostic ways to identify this bird from another bird that looks very similar and is found here on the Oregon coast, which is called the downy woodpecker, is to look at that length of the bill. This beak on these two birds is almost as long as its head. So if it was this long, the beak, and you put it on the head, it's almost the same. Bill is almost the same length as the head. But on a downy woodpecker, it's much tinier. It's going to be less than half or a little less than half of the length. They're also smaller. Downy woodpeckers are smaller. Hairy woodpecker, just overall in size, is larger. And they're mostly a black bird. Of course, on the back and tail, but that belly is white, and then they have this big white patch. I say it's like someone dipped their thumb in white paint and just smudged it right down the back of the bird. Now let's look at another picture of this bird. Here's another hairy woodpecker. See where that red is? It's not up here this time. It's right on the back of the head. And now I want to show you this, because every time I go to the East Coast and I see their hairy woodpeckers, I just can't believe it's like ours are dirty. Look at this, like it went through the wash or something. This is the same species, but on the East Coast. All hairy woodpeckers have these bold white stripes on the head. That's another key feature or key field mark. But look at that color difference. This is very typical of Pacific Northwest or West Coast hairy woodpeckers. It's not a clean, striking white. It's sort of what it's like a dirty color versus the East Coast. Every time I see them, I'm just like, oh my gosh, look how bright that bird is. So I had to share that with you all, a little anecdote. And then the American robin. This bird could have been put, I was determined, like, do I put it in the backyard? Do I put it in the field section? Do I put it in the forest? It's kind of all those things. You see it sitting in the trees eating berries. You see them on the ground looking for food. So the American robin is the largest, most abundant, and broadly distributed thrush in all of North America. Its diet is highly variable throughout the year. it's going to be eating like soft-bodied insects right now. Of course, lots of earthworms, especially. And then in spring, that's going to be in spring and summer when it's feeding young and feeding itself. But then it's going to switch to fruit in the fall. Sometimes it will eat our blueberries on our blueberry bushes in our gardens, but I get them on my cascara plant as well. And they are also a beautiful songster in our backyards. I love having my little robins around. They make a big cup nest out of mud and some straw. And they have good posture. Like all the thrushes, they're going to stand upright, have good posture, usually longer tails, and they usually use their eyes to look around for food as they're searching for those earthworms. One thing the robin has is that's diagnostic, of course, is this little eye ring. And then, of course, you just can't mistake that rufous breast. Okay, we talked earlier about a bird that this might look similar to, and I'll put a picture up in a second, but this is our little Wilson's warbler. This is a migratory species, spends its time in the equatorial regions most of the year, only coming up to the Oregon coast and other places in North America for breeding, and then right back down again. It's one of our smallest warblers. And the warblers, remember we looked at those conical bills earlier that's like indicative of those seed eaters? Look at this tiny thin bill. This is going to be used to look in cones and in trees and under leaves and little branches for insects. So it's going to be hunting insects. And those small thin bills are like tweezers, and they can just tweeze out that little bug that they're going to eat. They are a beautiful little lemon yellow below and an olive cap yellow, or like a little olive on the back. And the males only have this really dark black cap. And they're not going to be at a feeder ever, but you will see them maybe on the edge of your garden. They like to skulk around in the forest understory. Now, this is a bird you could maybe mistake it with. Here's our friend, the American goldfinch again. And look, remember I talked about those black wings and the 2 white wing bars? Doesn't have it on the Wilson's warbler. They do have that yellow, bright yellow body, that little black cap, but then look at that nice beak comparison. Thin, longer, or not necessarily longer, but just thin beak for picking insects, thicker beak for eating seeds. Now you won't mistake those. Here's another bird that's in our forest right now. I've been hearing a lot of them singing. It's a bird, really you hear it first and then you start looking for it. And in the winter, you'll see them with mixed flocks sometimes, but I usually just hear them first and then look up. So this is called the Townsend's warbler. This is a female. The male is stunning. I'll go ahead and show you this picture. And this is a bird, it's called a wood warbler, and it loves the treetops of mature forest. That's why I said you kind of listen for it first and then look, because it's not going to be on the ground or low in the bushes. You're always like this with a Townsend's warbler. Where is it? I hear it and it's up. It's going to be mid-story or upper canopy. And then here's that male. This is a picture that Ram took in our yard in the winter. Look at that bold face pattern. You can still see the female has some of that yellow bright bulb, but wow, on the male, it's just striking black and white. And then they have these wing bars as well, these white wing bars, which also help identify them. And they're going to glean. Glean just means like move about the treetops and snatch little insects and hawk insects in the tree canopy. Now let's look at another bird that has also just arrived. They only arrived like a week and a half ago in my yard. It's called the Swainson's thrush. I have not seen one yet, but when I go to bed at night, like half an hour before sunset, I start to hear their beautiful song. It's like, just like flute-like. And it's sort of this upward spiraling song that they really start to sing right in the evening, sometimes also in the very early morning. And if you know it, you really know it. They are just one of my favorite birds. Also like the robin, they have wonderful posture. You know, they might not be that colorful, but I feel like they're a beautiful bird. They're a medium-sized thrush. Most all the thrushes are slim-bodied with long wings and tails, that good posture. And again, this bird is just brown and pale underparts, but it has all those little flecks and speckles on the chest, which just makes it beautiful. It's got a little bit of a pale eye ring. And they're shy birds, but again, you hear them. That's why I said they arrived a week and a half ago, and I only know because I know their song. And they are wonderful. Now, they are one of the birds that I see most often and get reports of most often hitting windows. They see the reflection of the forest in the windows of your home, and they hit them and usually die. But I'm going to give you some tips on how to prevent that. No, it's coming up. Check on the time. Okay, we're almost done actually. And then we have our friend, the pileated woodpecker. I know some of you might be like, that's not in my yard. Every once in a while I get them. And this is a bird that nested in our yard and then came to feed its young. And my husband got these pictures. And then we haven't had it since. I think this was like 4 or 5 years ago, but I hear them sometimes. It's the largest woodpecker found in most of North America. Only the imperial woodpecker in Western Mexico is larger. It has to have dead and deteriorating trees to be able to make its nest cavity and to find the food it eats. It loves carpenter ants and other bugs like that. And you just can hardly mistake it for anything else. Although sometimes they are the size of a crow. People will think it's a crow or a really large blackbird. But once you see that facial pattern with that big red crest you see on the immature bird here and that bold face pattern, it's pretty unmistakable, that flame red crest. And often I hear them before I see them because they do loud drumming and they also make a very loud call. And then one of the most common birds of our forest is the red-tailed hawk. This bird is widespread all over North America, also has a wide range of habitats from woodlands to golf courses, even our backyards and suburban neighborhoods. I live here in Toledo on the central Oregon coast, and we have them up and down the little slough area where I am. And it is a pretty large hawk. Now, do they all have a red tail? Well, that is a mature bird that I first showed. And now here's an immature bird. And this is where some people get hung up. Before the bird reaches sexual maturity, it's going to have these stripes on its tail. But it's still going to have that rich brown color above and streaky pale belly. So the belly of these birds is one way you can help you ID if it's an immature bird and doesn't yet have that red tail. And they're often either seen soaring, or I see them a lot on telephone poles or power lines, or perched at the very top of a tree, just kind of watching for what they might eat. Okay, now I only have a few birds of the fields because again, we don't have that much of this habitat, and some of the birds I've already covered could be in our fields. I have down here a woodpecker. Like, how is that a bird of the field? But woodpecker, sorry, this is a northern flicker, and it is a type of woodpecker. And this particular bird spends a lot of time foraging on the ground. You'll see it looking for insects in the ground and eating them. So it is a bird that you could definitely see in a field. Another bird that you're going to see in the field flying over, hawking insects, is the barn swallow. This is a pretty large swallow. It's about the size of a sparrow. When perched, it looks like a cone. They have almost no neck that's visible, and they have beautiful long tail feathers that are like a V when you see them flying, which is pretty much one of the diagnostic features. The cliff swallow we also have here on the coast in some areas, but they don't have that very sharp V. It's just more of a little bit of a notch. And then they have that rusty, kind of that cinnamon color on the throat, and then that iridescent blackish blue on the back. Here's a picture of the bird on its other side. So it's like flipped on the other side. Often you don't see these white speckles because we are below the bird, not above, but they have these white spots on the tail feathers, and then you can see that iridescent blue and that chestnut on the throat. It happens to be one of my favorite birds. I see them all over the world when I travel because they are all throughout the Middle East, Africa, India, Malaysia, Australia. There's barn swallow. They don't all look the same as we have here in North America, but it still is the same species. One thing that's pretty cool is this bird used to only nest in natural areas, but now it's almost all nesting in artificial structures or human-made bridges, culverts on our homes. And it's been associated with humans for over 2,000 years. And in many cultures, it's considered good luck to have a swallow return and nest on your house. I'm just going to give one of these anecdotes in a second after this little poem, or sorry, quote from William Dawson that I'll let you read. This is how I feel when they return. When the barn swallows return to my front porch, my husband kind of rolls his eyes because he knows it's going to be a whole bunch of poop on the porch. But I am delighted because this is what I get to look at. I like to call them grumble cakes because they sort of look like that. This is from our front porch, and it's a nest that the birds use every year. And this, of course, is some of the young, kind of looks like a Bernie Sanders hairdo, feather do there. And I can't wait because I have a female and she's about to hatch some of these cuties out right now. This one's winking at us. So a lot of people are intolerant of them nesting on their structures. Personally, I just throw some newspaper down and it catches all the poop, and then I toss it every few days, put some more newspaper down, clean, good to go. And then I have these little cuties on my porch. Another bird that's in our fields, as I mentioned, is the northern flicker. Here on in Oregon, we have what's called the red shafted flicker. So that means, and it's not even red, it's pink. If you've seen one of these up close, it looks pink. But on the East Coast, this is yellow. So it's called yellow shafted, and it's lemon yellow. It's bright yellow under the tail feathers and underneath. But look at this fabulous bird. It's got it all. It's got pink, it's got polka dots, it's got a throat band. The males have this stripe on it's just fabulous. And I love northern flickers. They also come to your feeders. And then I think we have two more birds of the field. One is the killdeer. This is a type of plover. It's a shorebird. Has this very large rounded head, a big dark eye, and this red eye ring. All plovers have big eyes because they are looking for prey, and they also will hunt at night. So if it's moonlight, you'll see plovers out looking for their prey. They have these shorter bills. Roy Lowe may have talked about this in his presentation, but killdeer are all across North America. They're not just on our shores. You'll find them on wet fields and golf courses. I have them sometimes even in my lawn after a heavy rain. And they're one of the most familiar shorebirds throughout North America to people because they're quite tolerant of people. They nest along roadsides or in gravelly areas. And a lot of people think it's very sweet because they're very protective of their young, doing that broken wing display that people really, really, really like. And then another one of those non-natives. I had to include it though, because this is a bird of the field. Usually you'll see them in large flocks, European starlings, and they're nesting right now. They're cavity nesters. In their own right, they are very beautiful birds, and I've seen them in their native habitat and tried real hard to appreciate them there. But I do battle them in some of my nest boxes. And they look black at a distance, but they have an iridescent, like rainbow color up close. Oh, I'm not sure why that happened. And of course, they're common around towns. They do very well around people. Now let's quickly, I've got a couple slides on attracting birds. I just want to mention a few things, and that is that you can attract birds in what I'm putting as 4 different ways. First is just seeds and nuts, so putting out the dinner table for them. And this will be for our finches and our jays and other songbirds that like seeds and nuts. And you can see here in the background, I have black oil sunflower seed, and then I have striped sunflower seed and these 2 big seeds. In my opinion, the best bang for your buck is going to be black oil sunflower seed. Avoid striped sunflower seed, go for black oil sunflower seed. Then of course, nectar for our hummingbirds and orioles, suet, which my birds can't get enough of right now, and I make my own. And then of course, bird-friendly plants. Quickly on the sunflowers, on the seeds, again, black oil sunflower seed. If you are loaded, you got all the money in the world, you just want to sit around and look at birds, go for the whole chips or whole. I mean, I pay like $20 to $25 for a 40-pound bag of black oil sunflower. I think it's like $80 for the 40-pound bag of the whole chips. I can't afford that on a government salary, but maybe one day. But I used to, and it wasn't as expensive. It's just more expensive now. But it's no mess, so you don't have the mess to clean up with. And the largest diversity of birds like black oil sunflower, and they really like it whole. Then you have your sparrows and some of your like mourning doves. that also like millet, which is the top. This is white proso millet, or a millet mix where this has safflower and millet. Also a great thing. I don't ever put that in a tube feeder though, because if you put that in a tube feeder, all the birds that want the black wool sunflower are going to fling it out on the ground, and then the sparrows are going to pick it up and the pigeons are going to pick it up. So do yourself a favor, put the black wool sunflower in your hanging feeders and just sprinkle the millet in a hopper feeder or put it on the ground. And then peanuts if you want the jays. And then also there's safflower and Niger thistle. I've never had any luck with Niger thistle on the Oregon coast. It just seems to mold and I don't have enough birds that like it. But I did when I was in California. And then some birds that you might get coming to these feeders are black-headed grosbeak, which are here right now, migratory bird that's come in, and they love black oil sunflower seed. And they also like live mealworms, also another great thing to feed this time of year, especially when our songbirds are growing baby. You can get those dried and dehydrated ones, and I do feed those too, but nothing is as good as a live mealworm, and you can order those online too. Sometimes they'll come to suet, and they have a beautiful song. And then this is a lot of people's favorite bird at their feeder because they eat everything. It's called the band-tailed pigeon. It's a native bird. They're quite beautiful and striking, but when they come in, they can clean out a feeder. Their favorite foods, as you said, anything. Okay, maybe not anything, but they'll eat your millet, their crack corn, your sunflower, they'll eat wheat berry. They will eat it all. And when you have them, you know you have them. And then also pine siskin. We get these in winter and in the summer. In winter, but not every winter. They're an eruptive species, so they're going to be following cone crops, which is their major food, where they're looking for the seeds out of conifers. And so sometimes I have them in winter and sometimes I don't. Also in here, for contrast, is a little goldfinch. This looks like a female actually, so it's not going to be that bright canary yellow. One thing, the siskins are susceptible to salmonella poison. So if you start seeing sick pine siskins at your feeder, please take it down at least for a week or more and bleach it before you put it back up. They come right to my hand sometimes. And then for your nectar, you just want to make sure it's 4 parts water and 4 parts refined sugar. No honey, no other, just regular old refined table sugar. And one of the biggest things I see are dirty feeders and cloudy nectar. I just want to be real blunt here. If you don't have time to maintain a proper feeder, just don't put it up. I bleach mine twice a month. I clean them every single time I empty it. I never just empty it out and put it in, and change it every 4 days, every other day if it's going to be over 90 degrees. The reason is if that nectar goes cloudy, it can make them very sick. And then bird-friendly plants are important. Native plants like the flowering currant. This is in my yard. This is a cascara tree, and this is a young cedar waxwing. Also, this landscaping for wildlife is important. Leaving those snags if they're not a threat to your home or any kind of property. If you have some woods and you have some snags, or you can make some snags, you can girdle some alders. This is in our backyard. It's an old alder tree, red alder tree, and we had some baby northern flickers in it. And then I'm not a stickler for native plants. As long as it's not invasive, then I put it out, and let me tell you, my red hot pokers, woof, there's nothing prettier than when I get a Western tanager on my red hot poker and they got that same color pattern. So I love a red hot poker. And then also in my herb garden, Ram took this picture. This is borage, which I like to put the little flowers in my salad. And this bird is taking a bath as I had a sprinkler on my herb garden. It's a rufous hummingbird. And the final thing, this is my last slide, is I just want to put a plug on things that we all can do to help birds. The first is reducing window stripes. If you have a window, usually it's not every window in a home that is killing birds. It's usually 1 or 2 windows. And that's how it is at my house. I have 1 set of windows that was a problem. And so I got these dots and put them up, and it has literally prevented any strikes. I haven't had a single strike since then. So sometimes people are like, well, I don't want to treat my whole house. You don't need to. You can just treat the 1 window. And if you just put 1 hawk silhouette up, it's not enough. You have to have a pattern every 2 to 4 inches, which is why these dots are important. This is from the outside. From the inside, you barely see them. It's a darker color, so you don't see it. So I implore anyone who's getting Swainson's thrush hitting their windows to consider this. Also, you may have seen, I've seen it a lot more in my social media accounts, turning off the lights, especially during migration, because birds do get disoriented when we have those upward facing lights. If you haven't heard, cats kill over I wrote the number down, 2.4 billion songbirds just in the United States alone. That statistic is from the American Bird Conservancy. And it is the #1 direct human caused cause of death for our songbirds. So safer for kitties, safer for birds to keep those kitties indoors, or like catios or leashing them, or ways they can enjoy the outdoors, but just not hunting our songbirds. And then finally, reducing or eliminating the use of harmful pesticides. This is a red-tailed hawk that was taken by a bird watcher who was just watching the hawk hunt this rat. And he did not know at the time, but this rat was probably easy to catch because it had eaten decon, which is blue in color. It has this color, and then that hawk started pulling it apart, and it did eat all of this poison. So you can see the direct effect right there of what's going to happen to that bird as it eats this rat that's been poisoned. So trying to reduce or eliminate neonicotinoid pesticides and also rat poisons. And with that, this picture is not that sharp, but I absolutely love it. Rom took this. It was very, very cold in January, and birds were really hungry. It was icy. The ice had just melted, and this is an old apple tree, and he went out, and this hummingbird was so fluffy. It's an Anna's hummingbird. It was so cold. You can see it puffed out, and it was just drinking the water that was coming off of these old apples for a little bit of nectar. And I just thought it looks like, if you see this little bit of color, I don't know why that is, but it's kind of tan. It looks like it has a little jet pack and it's kind of floating in the air. And I just love this picture. So I wanted to share it to show how landscaping for wildlife is also so important for our birds. Okay, with that, I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Dawn. That was a great presentation, and I'm just disappointed it's going to be dark soon. I have to wait till morning to go birding. We've got a few questions from the audience, so we'll start with those. And I think if people use the raise a hand gesture, I may be able to unmute you to ask, but we'll start with the Q&A. And feel free to add more. So first off, Nancy White asked or mentioned that they've noticed fewer hummingbirds this year. They usually have Annas at their 2 feeders as well as Rufus, but have gone 2 weeks without a hummingbird. Any idea why they are seeing, and their neighbors are tending in Newport and Lincoln City, seeing fewer hummingbirds this year?
Well, someone else has mentioned this to me, and every year I hear this comment too, and it could be twofold. One is when they're nesting, you're just going to see less activity, particularly from the females, because they're going to be incubating the young, and they'll only take a few nest breaks each a few nest breaks each day. So once nesting is really underway, you'll see less activity, but it might be like an hour before dark is when I start to see my feeders really get active. Like those females are leaving the nest, coming to get a drink in for the night before they go back. And then some of the males are already dispersing from their territory because they've already done their job, if you will. I have a lot here at my house still. I run 2 feeders right now, and I am filling them both every day. They're getting drained. But I have heard from some folks who are right on the coast that they aren't getting as much activity. They might have to change their feeder every 3 or 4 days. But I'm going through a quart every day, every 2 days. So it may just be where you are, and how much natural habitat and nesting habitat is around too. If there's not a lot of good nesting habitat where you are, if you're like in the city, then you're going to want to, like where I am is more in the country. And so there's a lot more nesting opportunity too. So they may be in their garden as they're getting ready, set up their territory and mate. And then when they start to nest, they're going to head out to some other rural areas where there's better nesting habitat. But as we also know, Anna's hummingbird, shoot, they'll nest under your porch on a string of lights. But I haven't seen that with Rufus, but I've seen that with Anna's before.
I know here at Stucker Refuge, I have to fill my feeder every day.
Yeah, I see that difference between when I talk to people like in town versus in like rural areas, country, a lot more activity this time of year with hummingbirds.
Okay, and an expert question from Nancy Thomas. Do we get
Oh, hey,
dark-eyed
Nancy.
juncos other than the Oregon version?
Yes, most often I get a slate colored junco in my yard. Not a lot. Like I usually get one a year. If I got two, that would be special, but we do sometimes see others. Usually slate colored. I've heard of pink sided being seen, but typically slate colored.
Okay, here's a good question from Nancy. Do robins feel with their feet for prey? How do they tell where that worm is?
If they do, I've never heard that. But remember, they do have big eyes and they are looking. I've also heard, again, this is, and I'm not an ornithologist deeply studying and researching robins, but that they can hear and listen. So sometimes you see a robin move and then you'll see it do this number. And I have heard that they are listening. And some shorebirds do that same thing, and even oyster catchers will sometimes put their head down and listen for an active like muscle that might be slightly open and bubbling a little that it's going to be able to eat.
Okay, folks, we've got some more. Anybody have more questions? Put them in the Q&A, or we can try the raise the hand button. Couple comments of people who enjoyed it so much.
Someone's asking, what is my suet recipe? I I have tested this out too. Like I've bought store-bought suet and put it up against the suet that I make, and mine goes every time without fail. And it's not my recipe, but it's called Zick dough. And for anyone who knows Julie Zickafus, she's a naturalist and a bird lover who's quite popular and writes for some like bird watching periodicals. And it's called Zick, Zick dough, just like Kent Doty's last name, Dough. Zick dough. And if you look up that recipe online, you can just Google it, look up Julie Ziggafus or Zick dough suet recipe. You'll find it. And I make the big batch. And I make it like every 2 weeks. And it's a lot cheaper because suet, frankly, these days, I started making it because it just got so expensive. Um, and now I just make big batches. I cut it up and I put it in my freezer and I put a cake out each morning. You have to freeze it. It won't keep like the suet that you buy from the store. So you have to have some freezer space, but I make enough to have a cake each day and I make it every 2 weeks and it doesn't take that long. So Zick dough.
Well, I will have to try that. The Stellar's Jay-Z to suet block in about 30 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. That still may happen.
Any other questions for Dawn? Well, if no other questions, I'm sure if we could see and hear the audience, it would be resounding applause. So
Oh,
everybody
it's
raise
quiet.
their hands and wave at Dawn. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks everybody for coming and hopefully you enjoyed learning a little bit about our little
Oh,
backyard birds.
I do have one raised hand. Let me see if I can. I've got a couple raised hands actually.
Oh, they may just be waving their hands.
No, they
Oh, is
raised
it?
their hands. Let me see if I can. Bear with me a minute. Mary Jean, did you have a hand raised? Actually, Nancy White has a hand raised. Go ahead, Nancy. You should be able to talk.
I was wondering if you could spell the suet recipe so I could look it
Mhm.
up online.
I'm gonna look it up right now while we're sitting here. That way I don't get it wrong. I'm gonna Google exactly what I want you to Google so you won't mistake it. Um, let's make sure the recipe I want comes up. Yes, that's right. Okay, good. I typed in Zick, which is Z as in zebra, I, C as in country, and K as in Kellogg, Zick, Dough, suet. And then it's on the National Audubon Society's page. It says, this addictive homemade suet will keep your birds returning. And they do. There's also on her blog, the second thing that came up when I Googled it, says blogger.com, and it's Julie Zigafuss's nature blog. And it's her recipe from 2010. And let me tell you, it's still just as good. It's great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see if there's any. I don't see any other raised hands. Apologies. if I
Oh, this
missed.
is Mary Jean. She's my friend from Alaska who came and pet sat my lovebirds. I know her from my parrot rescue and parrot keeping. And she's just wonderful. I really love Mary Jean. You can say hi to her. She has two little birds, Leo and Lonnie. Nice.
Any other questions, folks? Let's see. I think we've got one in the Q&A. Just a thank you from Steve Griffiths.
Oh yeah,
Excellent
see some
presentation.
others. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks everybody for coming.
Well, thank you, and thanks audience for participating. And we'll remember our fall series coming up in October on community science and the importance of it. And in the meantime, happy birding to all.
Bye everybody.